Welcome to the debate. So I want you to imagine you are spending, I don't know, millions of dollars building this incredibly sophisticated, impenetrable firewall to stop a notorious hacker from accessing your network.
Okay, sounds like a standard Tuesday in cybersecurity.
Right, exactly. You have consultants drawing up threat matrices and bureaucrats arguing passionately about theoretical vulnerabilities. But while they are busy looking at the perimeter, your own employees are simultaneously buying that exact same hacker's software to do their daily accounting.
Wait, just because it's faster?
Because it is 10% faster, yes. And that is not a security failure you can just regulate away. That is an evolutionary market shift.
Right. And I guess the critical question becomes, does the fact that the software is faster and actively being used mean it is suddenly safe? Or does it mean the network is completely compromised without anyone even realizing it?
Exactly. The theoretical debate happening at the perimeter is completely disconnected from the practical, mechanical reality inside the house. And this is the exact dynamic we are dissecting today. We are exploring a highly provocative manifesto by Guy Lakeman.
Oh yeah, safety of AI is garbage.
Yes, along with its companion text, The Evolution of Intelligence and the Illusion of Safety. And the text is unsparing. Lakeman argues that artificial intelligence has already reached a, quote, viral pandemic state.
Which is a terrifying phrase.
It is. Yet he fiercely asserts that the mainstream panic over AI safety is basically a manufactured distraction. He frames AI safety as this smokescreen pushed by ignorant, self-interested authorities who, frankly, possess a long, documented history of institutional incompetence.
I mean, it is a text that pulls absolutely no punches. But the central tension we have to navigate here is whether Lakeman successfully proves that AI safety is just a, bureaucratic cash grab, or whether his own alarming evidence regarding AI's unprecedented viral proliferation actually contradicts his ultimate dismissal of safety concerns.
Well, I will be arguing that Lakeman is entirely correct in his assessment. He successfully identifies the mainstream AI safety movement as a manufactured panic. It's a generic, elite-driven distraction that prevents us from recognizing the necessity of evolutionary adaptation.
Right.
The reality is that the new open ownership ecosystem is already here. Adapting to it is a matter of survival, not something we can tax or regulate out of existence.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I will be arguing that Lakeman's text inadvertently proves exactly why rigorous AI safety is essential. Because while his critique of historical institutional hypocrisy is really sharp, his own vivid descriptions of AI's viral spread and the rapid corporate integration of highly capable agentic models, it unequivocally demonstrates that abandoning safety frameworks is just an intellectually reckless proposition.
All right, so let's lay out the mechanical foundation of Lakeman's argument, because it really hinges on the track record of the people demanding these safety frameworks.
The regulators.
Right. Lakeman's thesis rests heavily on the idea that the people shouting the loudest about AI protection are the very same people who have historically neglected fundamental, tangible hazards. He describes them as individuals collecting taxes and security salaries who rely on fantasy economics.
Yeah, he really doesn't hold back on the bureaucracy.
Not at all. For Lakeman, AI is no longer a mysterious, theoretical threat lurking in some distant sci-fi future. I mean, it is a normalized reality today.
Which, fair point.
He points out that an estimated 80% of U.S. AI startups and numerous global tech giants are already utilizing open ownership models in their enterprise infrastructures. AI is simply a procurement decision now.
Just another line item in the budget.
Exactly. So to focus on a bland, generic concept of AI safety distracts from the real threat, which is institutional ignorance and a refusal to adapt to evolutionary change. Those who try to restrict intelligence are, in his words, antiquated fools trying to tax nonsense.
Okay, but there is a massive structural contradiction in that thesis, though. The title of his manifesto dismisses AI safety as garbage, sure. But look closely at his very first paragraph.
The viral pandemic bit.
Yes, He describes AI as having reached a viral pandemic state much greater than COVID or climate change. He specifically notes that there are now hundreds of variants possessing practical specialist agentic abilities.
Right.
And these aren't locked in some secure server room somewhere. They are dispersed across millions of personal computers, handphones, and corporate enterprise systems.
Which I would argue proves his point that it's too late to put the genie back in the bottle.
But if we accept his premise that a technology with specialist agentic abilities has achieved a viral, pandemic-level spread across every device on the planet, then dismissing safety as nonsense is profoundly illogical.
How so?
Furthermore, his own examples of historical disasters where governments prioritized corporate greed over public well-being, they actually serve as the ultimate argument for stringent AI safety frameworks, not against them. I mean, if authorities are as corrupt and inept as he claims, we need more robust, structurally sound safety protocols, not a total surrender to the chaos.
Okay, well, let's actually dig into how Lakeman uses history to frame that threat. Because he doesn't just call regulators inept. He builds a structured argument showing the exact mechanics of their deception.
Yeah, the 1950 stuff.
When television advertising promoted the dummy Joneses, broadcasters used lies and visual deception to basically sell bright, shiny rubbish.
Right, creating a culture of keeping up with the Joneses.
Precisely. The mechanism here was a one-way broadcast of aspirational lies into millions of homes. And Lakeman argues this established a concrete paradigm in consumerist societies and politics. People were conditioned to accept deception. He then traces this to the 1980s, noting that the removal of broadcasting and advertising regulations made the telling of lies common behavior, which was actively supported by the press corps. The argument is that the very institutions that built an entire society on visual deception and deregulation are now suddenly pretending to care about the, quote, safety of information.
It is a genuinely strong historical critique of the media and political apparatus. I'll give him that. Lakeman is entirely right that the 1950s advertising era and the 1980s deregulation created a cultural tolerance for deception. But, there's a glaring logical flaw in how he maps that mechanism onto artificial intelligence.
What's the flaw?
Well, if the visual deception of 1950s television advertising, which, remember, was just a static one-to-many broadcast, if that was powerful enough to ruin political paradigms and corrupt consumerist societies, what happens when that capability is automated?
He would argue we adapt to it, just like we adapted to television.
But the mechanism of adaptation is completely different because the technology is fundamentally different. We are no longer talking about a few advertising executives on Madison Avenue broadcasting a static lie to a passive audience.
No, obviously not.
We are talking about, as he explicitly states, hundreds of variants of agentic AI models on every handphone. We are looking at the exponential multiplication of that exact same deception, except now it flips from a one-to-many broadcast to a one-to-one interaction.
So you're saying it's personalized?
Exactly. It is bespoke, algorithmic deception dynamically generated to exploit the specific psychology of the individual user. If the 1950s paradigm was a localized disaster, the automated, agentic version of it requires massive safety guardrails to prevent total epistemic collapse.
Okay, let me pause you there. Because when you say epistemic collapse, you are talking about the complete inability of a society to agree on a shared baseline of reality, right?
Yes, precisely.
But Lakeman's point is that the authorities you want building those guardrails are the ones who destroyed our shared reality in the first place.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You are assuming the solution to this multiplying deception is regulation by the same authorities who caused the initial problem. Let's look at the operational examples Lakeman provides.
Okay.
He points out that governments promoted the corporate greed that led to industrial city heat islands, which physically impact the climate. And how did those same governments respond? With what he calls idiotic carbon taxes.
Which he views as entirely performative.
Exactly. The mechanics of a carbon tax, in his view, subversively benefit the government's balance sheet while doing absolutely nothing to stop the heat radiating from cities.
Right. He also points out that during COVID, governments imposed restrictions that caused ongoing economic hell for the public, yet they mechanically left untreated trading chains open on aircraft and shipping. They literally allowed the virus to spread like wildfire.
Yeah, the shipping routes were a mess.
So if we acknowledge, as the text states, that these exact same authorities implement punitive taxes on the public while leaving the actual massive systemic vulnerabilities wide open, why on earth would we trust these antiquated fools to regulate AI? Isn't the AI safety movement just another idiotic carbon tax? Just a way for institutions to collect security salaries, but leaving the real systemic issues completely untouched?
The analogy of the carbon tax is fascinating, but it highlights exactly where Lakeman's logic breaks down. Let's accept his premise entirely for a moment. Let's agree that a carbon tax is an ineffective, subversive tool used by uneducated fools to extract wealth without solving the heat island problem.
Okay.
That critique only proves that bad, cynical regulation exists. It does not prove that the underlying danger, the changing climate, is an illusion. And it certainly does not prove that we should abandon all attempts at environmental safety.
Well, sure, but
The same goes for his COVID example. The fact that governments mismanage trading chains by leaving shipping routes open doesn't mean a viral pandemic isn't dangerous. It means we needed structurally sound, highly targeted safety protocols that actually addressed the vector of transmission.
I hear you, but the regulations didn't do that.
Right, but therefore, if governments are prone to implementing superficial AI safety regulations that just serve as a tax, the answer isn't to throw up our hands and declare AI safety is garbage. The answer is to demand effective frameworks that actually address the agentic capabilities he is so clearly worried about.
But you are assuming a theoretical world where perfect, friction-free safety frameworks can be implemented before the technology deploys. Lakeman's data on corporate adoption proves that the market has already moved completely past theoretical safety debates. It's already in practical global integration. The transition has already happened.
I wouldn't say we're past the debate.
The text provides a highly specific list of large, popular companies that are actively using open ownership cyber intelligence right now to maintain top-tier performance. We aren't waiting for a safety framework. The procurement decisions are being signed today.
Let's talk about those procurement decisions, because I think they illustrate the risk perfectly.
Well, let me just lay out the scale of it first, because it is staggering. Coinbase is using GLM 5.2 and Kimi 2.7 for specific operational tasks. Shopify, Airbnb, and Uber Eats are moving workloads to Alibaba's Quinn family of models.
Massive companies.
Yes. Siemens is adopting DeepSeek and Quinn for inter-earnest scaling. Microsoft, historically one of the pioneers of closed models, is testing DeepSeek v4. Lindy has transitioned specific workloads to it. When we talk about an open ownership ecosystem, we aren't talking about hobbyists tinkering in a garage.
No, definitely not.
We are talking about the world's largest logistics and financial companies shifting their underlying digital architecture away from closed models to highly capable, globally distributed architectures. This widespread adoption is feeding faster iterations. It is creating strong, viable alternatives to traditional models.
Which is incredibly fast-paced.
Right. So the safety debate is entirely irrelevant when 80% of US AI startups have already incorporated this into their infrastructure. Lakeman's point is that we didn't have a massive regulatory summit about this. The ecosystem just moved because people needed to parse data faster. It is moving way too fast for bureaucratic hand-wringing.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You were listing off Shopify and Uber Eats adopting Quinn as if that rapid adoption is undeniable proof of safety. But isn't that just proof of profit-seeking?
I mean, they are businesses.
Exactly. The massive rapid transition to open ownership models that you just outlined is the precise reason why safety cannot be treated as a mere bureaucratic hurdle. Look at the mechanisms driving this shift. Lakeman explicitly blames corporate greed promoted by governments for the unchecked growth of industrial cities and the resulting heat islands.
He does.
Human nature hasn't changed. We must assume that this exact same corporate greed is driving the rapid adoption of AI by companies like Cursor, which is processing complex coding workflows using Moonshot AI's Kimi K2.5, or Chap's Vision utilizing Quinn models.
Are you saying operational efficiency is inherently dangerous?
I am saying that when a massive corporation moves workloads to a new model family, they are doing it for the bottom line, not for societal well-being. And we need to clarify what we mean by these models, because we aren't just talking about a sophisticated chatbot that answers customer service queries.
Sure.
When Lakeman says these models have practical, specialist, agentic abilities, he means AI that can independently execute multi-step workflows. It can open programs, make decisions, and execute tasks without human oversight. If we know that corporate greed historically causes environmental and social disasters when left unchecked, then the blind procurement of agentic AI models without rigorous safety standards isn't evolutionary adaptation. It is a disaster waiting to happen.
I think that's a fairly pessimistic view.
Treating a highly capable, autonomous technology merely as a procurement decision is the ultimate form of the institutional ignorance Lakeman claims to despise.
That is a distinctly cautious, regulatory way of looking at corporate adoption. You are framing it entirely as a hazard to be mitigated, but Lakeman frames this as an evolutionary pressure to be embraced.
Oh, the evolutionary angle.
Yes, let's look at how this ties into global policy and human evolution, because the text makes a massive pivot here that we cannot ignore. Lakeman asserts that events do not happen by magic. Intelligence has always mechanically impacted evolution, especially for human beings. The fundamental rule of biology and society is that those who adapt to change survive, and those who do not go extinct. They become a disruptive drain on the community.
Right.
And he points out that the global geopolitical landscape is already reacting to this evolutionary shift. Over 50% of the world has changed toward community support and protection by embracing the non-individualist elite policies of BRICS+.
And how does he define the mechanics of that BRICS Plus approach in the context of this technology? Because the text paints a very specific picture.
Well, he says BRICS+ is achieving this adaptation by actively educating those who are just starting school in the social benefits of an intelligent society. They are weaving intelligence into the foundation of their communities from day one. Contrast that with his view of other nations, where, as he puts it, antiquated fools still kill each other on their own streets.
A bit dramatic, but okay.
The people trying to restrict the use of intelligence, trying to lock it behind safety frameworks, are showing off their foolish ignorance. They're trying to tax nonsense. The world has irrevocably changed, as Lakeman declares. Some have won, and the few anal elite who are clinging to old regulatory models have lost. If we follow the mechanics of evolution, the open ownership ecosystem isn't a hazard driven by greed. It is the new environmental baseline. Adapting to it through education and integration is the only logical path forward.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the contradiction in that strategy? You are painting a picture of this as a utopian community-focused initiative, but I am looking at Lakeman's own warnings and seeing a massive, glaring flaw.
A flaw in the BRICS+ adaptation?
Yes, he applauds the move toward community support and protection. But true community protection necessitates actually safeguarding the public from systemic risks. You cannot protect a community while simultaneously declaring that safety from a viral, agenic technology is garbage. Furthermore, Lakeman's own text provides a devastating example of what happens when high technology is deployed without a protective framework.
You mean the military references?
Exactly. He critiques how war makes money for governments and their cronies. He specifically calls out the stories of high-technology killing machines that don't do anybody any good and cause greater social friction and conflict.
He does point that out, yes. But as a failure of government oversight and old-world cronyism.
The model integrated into a sprawling corporate or government enterprise system, if not a high-technology machine. If history proves, as he insists it does, that authorities will use high technology to build killing machines that fuel conflicts for profit, then that is the absolute strongest possible mandate for AI safety.
So you think AI is basically equivalent to a physical weapon here?
I think you cannot look at the military-industrial complex, recognize its capacity for immense physical destruction, and then argue with a straight face that we shouldn't worry about the safety of autonomous intelligent systems spreading to every device on Earth. The very policies focused on community protection that he praises would logically require strict oversight of such technologies. Otherwise, they just become the next iteration of those high-tech killing machines.
Well, I think you are fundamentally conflating the physical hardware of war with the digital architecture of intelligence. Lakeman is drawing a very deliberate line between the physical destruction caused by old world government greed, bombs, heat islands, disrupted supply chains, and the new world of decentralized open ownership intelligence.
But the risk...
Hold on, the high technology killing machines are a product of the old, closed, heavily regulated government systems where power is hoarded. The open ownership AI ecosystem, characterized by these rapid iterations across platforms like DeepSeek and QN, it mechanically decentralizes power.
Does it, though?
Yes, because when the underlying architecture of an AI model is accessible, rather than locked behind the API of a single monopoly, intelligence is democratized. It cannot be hoarded by the cronies supplying fuel for the fires of war. Therefore, the old model of safety, which was, mechanically speaking, just gatekeeping by the elite, is obsolete. Embracing the viral, decentralized spread of intelligence is the actual protection.
And that is the core illusion Lakeman is attacking without even realizing it. We hear open ownership and we think safe because it is transparent. But democratizing at hazard does not neutralize the hazard. It merely distributes the risk.
Distributing the risk empowers the individual, though.
Does it? I mean, if a highly infectious biological virus is released, we don't call it democratized biology and celebrate its spread to every household. We recognize it as a crisis. Lakeman uses the phrase viral pandemic state for a reason.
Sure, metaphorically.
But whether an agentic model is closed and hoarded by a tech monopoly or open ownership and utilized by a startup on Alibaba's cloud, the core capabilities of the model remain potent. You do not hand out blueprints to a bomb and call it community safety.
That's a bit of an extreme comparison.
But if the technology can generate the modern equivalent of 1950s visual deception on an algorithmic one-to-one scale, or if it can autonomously execute corporate workflows in a way that prioritizes profit over human well-being, the ownership structure doesn't magically strip away the danger. The safety framework isn't about gatekeeping intelligence. It is about ensuring that as this intelligence integrates into society, it actually aligns with the very social benefits Lakeman wants children to be educated about. You cannot teach the social benefits of an intelligent society if the underlying infrastructure of that intelligence is fundamentally volatile.
Okay, let's summarize where we stand on this incredibly dense, provocative material. I maintain that Lakeman successfully exposes the current discourse around AI safety for what it truly operates as, a generic, elite-driven distraction. He proves through historical analysis that authorities have entirely lost the credibility to regulate our future, having spent the last 70 years promoting deception, environmental degradation, and conflict.
Right.
The true path to survival relies on recognizing that the firewall has failed and the new technology is already integrated into the house. We must embrace open ownership AI as an evolutionary necessity. AI is already a mechanical procurement reality for the world's largest logistics and infrastructure companies. Adapting to this intelligent ecosystem rather than trying to tax and regulate it out of fear is the only way to avoid becoming a disruptive drain on the community.
And I maintain that while Lakeman offers a genuinely sharp, deeply necessary critique of historical institutional hypocrisy, his ultimate conclusion is fatally undermined by his own premises. His vivid descriptions of AI's viral, agentic spread across every conceivable device, combined with his hard data on the rapid corporate integration of powerful models like DeepSeek and QN, unequivocally prove that AI safety is a critical necessity. If authorities are as corrupt, and corporations as greedy as he claims, then releasing an unmanaged viral intelligence into that flawed system without stringent safety frameworks is just the height of folly. AI safety is not garbage. It is the only logical response to the very reality he so meticulously describes.
What is genuinely fascinating is that beneath all the friction here, we both acknowledge a shared agreement on one key point from the text. Historical authorities and governments have repeatedly, almost systematically, failed to protect the public.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether we are examining the Dummy Jones's broadcast deception of the 1950s, the disastrous mismanagement of COVID trading chains, or the self-serving implementation of carbon taxes around industrial heat islands, the track record of institutional protection is undeniably abysmal.
There is absolute convergence there. The text makes an ironclad case that the people historically placed in charge of hazard management have routinely prioritized fantasy economics and cronyism over actual public well-being. Where we fundamentally diverge is the prescription for the future.
Right.
You and Lakeman look at this long history of mechanical failure and conclude we should abandon the concept of safety regulation entirely when it comes to AI. I look at this exact same history and conclude that because our institutions are so deeply flawed, establishing rigorous, transparent, and structurally effective AI safety frameworks is more urgent now than it has ever been for any prior technology.
And that divergence is exactly why exploring controversial manifestos like Lakeman's is so vital. It forces us to actively challenge our default assumptions about how technological regulation functions in the real world. To fully understand the trajectory of global protection, we have to look much closer at the underlying mechanics of the shifting open ownership AI ecosystem detailed in this work.
Definitely.
We have to look at the procurement sheets, the global policy shifts, and the evolutionary pressures acting upon our digital infrastructure right now. There is so much more to explore in how these models are actively reshaping the enterprises we interact with every single day. It leaves us with a critical, defining question to answer for ourselves. When we look at the consultants frantically trying to build a fence, are we finally adapting to the reality that the technology is already operating inside the house? Or are we simply blinding ourselves to a novel threat by assuming democratization equals safety?
A question we will all have to answer, sooner rather than later.